Hey everybody, we're bringing you a special Wednesday show this week because Jack is in China. So this episode's going to kick off with a weekly recap of what's going on in Pro Dota 2 with Woodshrew running solo. It's a quick, short 20-25 minute recap, and then after that we are going to follow it up with a one-on-one interview that I did with Jack, Korean BBQ, earlier this week. Just talking about what's going on in Shanghai, his past, and it was really interesting, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So stay tuned after the What Regular Wednesday show for that one-on-one.
Hey everyone, it's Woodshrew giving you guys a half dosage today of the Wednesday show, recurring wannabe cast. Jack is out of commission this week. If you guys didn't catch it last week, he's actually in China right now because he's got some work to do as a translator, I believe, at the Shanghai Major. This week he's out visiting relatives and friends in China, which is good because he's taking advantage of of his stay pre-Shanghai. Next week, I'll make sure to press him for some good China-related Dota stories or Dota-related China stories. But, maybe he brings back some spiritual Chinese force and makes his climb to the 6K MMR Holy Land. We'll see what happens. Let's get straight to it. We have a lot of stuff to cover, and it's only me, so I'm going to try to tackle all the news that's happened this week in Pro Dota. There's been a nice steady flow of games on Twitch. We've got a couple of active tournaments going on, each of which have a pretty generous roster of teams. I think they're mostly European-based, so I'll just get right to it. We had the We Play Dota League. I think that's Season 3. Dota Pit, which is that NA-based tournament. And finally, we have the Captain's Draft 3.0 tournament, which is, of course, brought to you guys by Dota Cinema. I mostly watched the Captain's Draft games, especially with an emphasis on making sure I watched Evil Geniuses because, their appearances online and even in tournaments are few and far between. So it's nice to get to watch Artur and the boys play a bit, the Sad Boys. But, it is Captain's Draft, so there's not too much I can really bring you guys in terms of draft analysis or hero trends. I have to dig in a bit more because, of course, as you guys probably know, Captain's Draft is a much more limited hero pool and to draft from. And so it's a little bit more of a, unknown quantity, so to speak. And so in terms of, you can't put too much onus on the prioritization of picks just because you don't have the full hero pool to play with. And so PPD's, I like to study him as a drafter a lot and try to bring you guys some analysis of his thoughts on the game because usually they're, pretty much in line with the best minds around the world. Or at least brings his own effective flavor to the game. The DC Captain's Draft Tournament has actually pretty impressive lineup with Alliance, VP, Empire, and Digital Chaos in one group, and the other group having Evil Geniuses, Vega Squadron, Liquid, and Mama Boys. So that's a pretty stocked roster of teams for you guys to catch. The playoff seeding is almost finished, with Alliance seemingly about to finish the top of their groups, with EG and Vega being the number 1 and 2 finishers in the other group, and they already made it to the playoff brackets. Liquid and Mama are already slotted to start off the tournament in the lower bracket in the playoffs, and we'll see if they can make it through and make some noise. Navi fanboys, it's you guys can kind of tune in on the WePlay games because they've been facing off against a lot of decent European competition, mostly CIS based, from what I can see. Navi's actually doing quite well since their repeated string of roster changes, but at the top of their group, and they're tied with Vega Squadron and Empire, which is, it's promising signs of a bounce back for that team. Meanwhile, in Dota Pit, Navi is also playing pretty good, pretty stellar, I'd say, tied with London Conspiracy. Definitely a name we haven't heard too often of recent in their group, with Team Empire on the top of the other group. So looks like Navi and Empire kind of, they're kind of getting their hands dirty in the European action that we've seen this past week. I want to definitely take note that we've seen a couple of BZZ Pugna appearances with actually the first time I saw the renewal of Rock's Kiss, European and CIS team that we fans of the scene are familiar with if you guys go a couple years back. But with you, maybe if you guys are tuning into Pro Dota more recently, you guys haven't heard of the organization name too much. I'll go ahead and start the official BZZ Roxkiss Rebirth fan group and ask you guys to send the energy for some big upsets, because there's two teams that are going to make it through the Dota Pit European qualifiers, and if Roxkiss can maybe overtake Team Empire, that'd be something to see. Some more BZZ Pugna in some Pro Dota matches. But, not to blitz right through everything, but we have a lot to discuss, and maybe for me to bring to you guys' attention, because there was a really big news to kind of carve up right now and to bring to the forefront, and that's the continuous Team Empire, and actually it really belongs to the overarching recent news of just the CIS restructuring process, and Team Empire is the latest team to, I guess, rejoin the fray with Resolution, their previous mid lane player and also in-house invoker expert, maybe seeking asylum in the North American refugee camp, if I'm not too bold to say, in Digital Chaos. At the same time, Digital Chaos is going to say goodbye to actually TC, terrific carry, terrific Canadian, whatever name you want to choose for Tyler Cook. He was the previous carry player for Digital Chaos, which is a bit of an interesting, a little bit interesting that we didn't actually see Yawar leave the team. I guess the team still has a lot of faith in their mid lane player, and because this is Yawar's first season, official season playing for a major organization in Pro Dota, and it'll actually be TC's number to be called. And so Resolution is actually a mid lane player, and TC has the carry. It kind of gives Digital Chaos this small conundrum of having two mid lane specialists, I'd say. But it looks like Yawar is going to move on over to play carry, and Resolution, for the time being, is going to take up the reins in the mid lane. And I don't know if you guys are too familiar with the way Resolution used to play on Team Empire during the time that Silent was the carry for Team Empire, but they both had this kind of interesting 1-2 dynamic that was really popular in that current meta, with teams like the old Evil Geniuses roster, back when Fear used to play carry and RTZ would play mid. They would kind of swap lanes as well, and you used to see it with Envy and Fata on the old C9 roster, but that kind of 1-2, they would swap lanes from time to time dynamic was something you saw back in Team Empire, and maybe we'll see that continuing trend in Digital Chaos. But I want to take the time to do a little bit of a history lesson to kind of bring up these two teams and bring up some talking points, because it's a bit of a tedious exercise, I'll be honest, because both teams, well, I'd say definitely Digital Chaos has been a bit more stable, relatively speaking, but they've also have a much shorter tenure as both a professional team and as an actual gaming organization. Team Empire has been with us for a longer time, but up until, I'd say, recently, they've been a very stable team. And they've had mostly periods, I'd say, pretty long periods of having like kind of a stable core or roster of core players. Well, we'll get into the Digital Chaos side of things. And to bring you guys back to last fall, 2015, the team kind of started out with BBQ being sort of the support centerpiece of the team, himself being a rookie player, kind of a newbie to this professional scene. And he was kind of relied upon to be not just the fifth position support, but actually the kind of the shot caller or the in-game captain, so to speak. And the success for Digital Chaos was kind of few and far in between, to put it in a nice way. But it wasn't too long before he stepped down from the fifth position support role to actually the coach in November. And this actually coincided with the departure, and actually the departure of 1437 from the defunct Cloud9 Dota roster, and his joining, picking up the fifth position support for Digital Chaos. So, we kind of had this kind of this new fresh blood injected to the scene with Yawar, AUI, and BBQ kind of being the centerpiece of that Digital Chaos squad. But it wasn't too long before BBQ kind of had to step aside and kind of wait for his name to be called up again. from the sidelines. It was a bit unfortunate because there was a lot of commotion about Biryu in terms of how much he was valued as a free agent. I think Eternal Envy was a notable player who was seeking out his his playing services as a support, and but for now we'll have to wait to track his progress. And with this change, Digital Chaos, they're gonna have a pretty loaded roster in terms of just talent and in terms of Yawar and Resolution. I think two of the pretty highly regarded just in terms of raw skill, both high MMR players, both very capable core players. Paired with a pretty big hotbed of playing experience when you talk about players like 1437, who's played support for a long ass time and also has played the role as a captain. You can look at him as just a tome of knowledge. And Boba is also someone who's considered, very thoughtful player and has done his own share of drafting and captaining and coaching. You have AUI, probably like a math textbook in a player. Probably if you had to name one player who takes such an approach to the game, you'd probably point out AUI with his notorious efficiency in terms of farming. So things look good on the DC side. But to bring it back to Team Empire, we've got a lot of stuff to cover in terms of their history of roster changes this past season. I'd say bringing it into the post TI5 period, we had this trio of like Silent, Resolution, and Yoki. And it wasn't long, I think it was maybe hours since the end of the TI5 matches for Empire that Yoki was, I don't know what the exact details were because there's kind of few and far between coming out of the CIS region, but Yoki left the team. He was the offlane player for Team Empire for about a year, from 2014 to 2015, and the team kind of rejiggered with a kind of a new core with like Silent, Resolution, and Aloha, because from September, I'd say, to December, those three have been the mainstays until, of course, recently. Yoki, I definitely considered him as one of the standout players of last season, the TI5 season. He's one of the, I think, the most innovative offlane players, and I think he kind of dictated a lot of the meta and the general approach to the offlane, because a lot of the heroes that he would pick up, like Sand King and Earthshaker, and we now consider like when we talk about more at the draft screen, we're like, oh yeah, this looks like a good Earthshaker game, this is a good Sand King game. You owe a lot of that, that trend to Yoki, because those were the heroes that he would specialize on. And of course, he didn't have the type of success that you talk about other rookies from that season in terms of like Sumail. But Yawar had I think he was really highly valued in the CIS region. I've talked to a few people who are in like management or maybe not management, but definitely like community members of the CIS region, and they all considered Yoki kind of like a something to build around, definitely a piece to build around. It's kind of a shame that he went through such a strange identity crisis, kind of jumping from position to position. He didn't really, he doesn't really feel like I think he just didn't enjoy playing the offlane position because, he left Empire. He only rejoined as the carry position for a period of time, and, he didn't seem satisfied with his limited role in that respect, and he kind of held that strong Team Empire roster hostage after leaving post TI5, because it felt like if he could just stay with those guys, they would continue their pretty high level success, because since that major reshuffle post TI5, Team Empire hasn't really been the same since. Their performance hasn't been the same. You don't really consider them as one of the elite CIS teams. It kind of feels like the top of the pile now is sort of just VP and everyone below them, with Team Empire definitely belonging to that tier 1 group of teams, but CIS is just one region within the greater European nation states, and to be the best of that small region is just one thing. And when you want to take into account all the best teams in the entire world, talk about China, talk about NA, talk about intercontinental teams like Team Secret, well, it's not that much of an accomplishment to be the best of the CIS. So Team Empire has a lot to climb up in terms of closing the gap. So, continuing this little bit of a history lesson, Silent left Team Empire in December 2015, which ended about a 2-year tenure as Empire's carry player. And he left to play for Virtus Pro, and Actually, some news came out this past week that he'll actually be playing for what is the team? Hellraisers, I believe, as a stand-in. So I'm not sure what's the exact the situation right now for a bunch of these CIS teams because it looks like a couple of shuffles. This kind of came in coincidence with Funnick and Havost leaving Na'Vi and joining the roster as the offlaner and carry for a short period of time before they actually went through some role swaps with, I think, Havost playing offlane now and Funnick playing for position support. I mean that pretty much does it in terms of all the roster changes that have happened, and it can be a bit easy to kind of get lost in the midst of everything. But the crux of it, I think, that we should probably look at is that the current situation between DC and Empire was pretty striking in terms of how similar the position they were in. Both teams received direct invites to compete in the main qualifiers for the Shanghai Major. They got direct invites in their regions, and both teams actually couldn't make it out of the playoff brackets, and therefore they couldn't earn themselves and secure themselves a spot at the major. Both teams actually fell in the same exact stage of the playoffs as well, losing in the losers bracket finals, making them one series away from qualifying to the second of the three majors that are Valve sponsored and have been announced this year. So maybe the cookie crumbles a different way. Maybe these matches go one way or another. DC and Empire could be qualified for one of these for the Shanghai Major, and in that situation, we don't have a situation like this on our hands where Resolution leaves the EU region to switch over to DC, and Empire has this gap in the mid lane. And so what's my take on it? It's really easy to flag Resolution and kind of blacklist them as a European defector in the spirit of, players like, Black, Koikfa, Bambo, Sexy Bambo. And I think it's understandable for a lot of fans and followers of the scene to have this knee-jerk reaction. He's leaving the EU scene for a weaker region. A la, maybe Bambo when he joined up with Team Zephyr playing in Korea. I think it's reasonable to believe there's more to it than just the Dota side of things, at least in this scenario. Of course, North America is comparatively the quote-unquote weaker region when you talk about EU and China. And, Resolution will probably just skyrocket to the top of the list as one of the best mid laners in North America. So, obviously, strong player in EU, makes it to probably the best mid laner in NA. It's obvious that that's going to be a big motivating factor for him to swap over teams. But, Resolution, he's trying to make a career decision. Esports is a business. It's obvious that it's more to it than just the Dota side of things. I definitely want to direct you guys to a pretty thoughtful and comprehensive blog post that was written by Scant. You guys can look him up on Twitter. The blog post talked about a lot of the different advantages to moving to a North American organization from Resolution's point of view. And I think a big part of his post was highlighting the fact that DC have had so far a very strong reputation for taking care of their players. I won't discuss the leaked salary numbers because firstly I don't remember them precisely, but for the sake of clarity, the players each are paid a very handsome salary, at least as professional players go in 2016. Somewhere in the 4 to 5 digits per month or something like that, and that's really, it's a strong environment. It's definitely an appealing environment for Resolution. CIS region definitely doesn't have the cash flow from sponsors that can compare to something like that, and Digital Chaos has been a team that has a lot of potential but hasn't backed them up with results. And with the addition of Resolution, maybe the performance can start to match up with the kind of the financial backing of the team. But it's just it's obviously a smart business decision for Resolution in that scenario, right? But to close on this topic, Scan touched on this as well. It's a chance for Resolution to experience different environment, a different culture. Play with different people, really, because how closed in the CIS region can be, with limitations about language and so on and so forth. and and continue his own learning process as a player. Because I want to bring it back to Black, actually, who left Europe to play in China. Who I think it was pretty much publicly known that he played really, trained really desperately and fought really hard to bring up his own little squad, like youth squad in CIS game. This is pretty much 2014, I believe, the TI4 period, and this was like a team with an average age of like say 19, I think, if I can remember correctly. And these guys, I mean, now you might recognize some of these players' names. June and Inflame. These are two of the kind of next generational, like the leaders of the next generation of the Chinese scene. And this CIS game team, they earned a TI4 play-in invite, coming second in the Chinese qualifiers. And this Chinese qualifiers was stacked as hell. Like teams like Hyper Glory Team, Tongfu, LGD even came out of this qualifier, and they came in second. I mean, their fairy tale story kind of had to come to a pretty quick end, but they still made the flight to Seattle, and they ended up playing in the play-in tournament. Unfortunately, they lost to Team Liquid 2-0, which at the time had the whole Demon Bulba Koikfa thing going on. But this team, they overcame pretty insane circumstances, coming out of like a pretty, an enormous field of talented teams, very experienced teams, very fresh teams, and maybe they make it into the tournament. Maybe they do a little bit of a C-Deck impersonation, as we all know, and maybe they catch fire. Who knows? But Black didn't just stop there. Obviously, he had a lot of success, short-lived, but definitely a lot of success with the Vici Gaming Squad. As you guys probably remember, with playing with FY and Super as the carry. I still have good fond memories of watching his Terrorblade and a little bit of his carry Centaur. And he pivoted from there, from the Chinese scene to the Southeast Asian scene, and he played a little bit with Fnatic this past season. And to conclude, like, he hasn't had like a fairy tale ending right now, but Black has made the best of his circumstances, and his teamless circumstances and difficult roster situations. And I think by all accounts we can all say that he's gone a hell of a lot better since leaving the EU region to play in China. And there's some similarities you guys can definitely see between Resolution's decision, and also some strong differences that are probably in favor of Resolution. He's going to try to do a little bit of a career reboot maybe, and I'm definitely excited to see how he fares. He hasn't played too many games with DC, but it's only been 2 matches, I think, in the Captain's Draft tournament this week. But we'll see how he develops and what he brings to his new team in Digital Chaos. And with Team Empire, it's going to be a little bit more of a wait for us to see what they have in store. I think I saw FN, I think is the name of the stand-in that's currently playing with them. I wanted to look him up on the EU leaderboards, see if he was rocking some 8K MMR swag, but unfortunately our friend FN is still sitting at number 24 with a measly 7.4K MMR in the EU region. But we'll see how that team fares with their little bit of their Na'Vi pairing of Funnick and Havost, trying to have their own kind of reboot. And that's pretty much it for the this week's run of pro news. That's all for this half dosage for the Wednesday show with the DotP Studios. It's been good, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the little bit of the history lesson and a little bit of a run through with the pro Dota matches. It's been Woodshrew. You guys can follow me at Woodshrew and the DotP network at DotP_show on Twitter. Tomorrow we've got the Theorycraft Thursdays as usual to look forward to, and take care. I hope we can welcome you guys back with Jack's appearance next week, and if not, we'll definitely try to fill the gap and the void of his 5K MMR Chinese translating ability. So have a good evening, guys.
Hey guys, this is Cyphus from Defense of the Patients. I just want to say thanks for listening and telling your friends. You guys are the best advertising that we could ask for as a show. If you'd like to continue to support DotP, consider the DotP Patreon. The Patreon's been completely revamped, and we've added new prizes and new milestone goals. Prizes include immortalization on the DotP website, a chance to 1v1 mid Roland and prove you can take him on, and even a chance to be a DotP show host for an episode doing and talking about whatever you'd like. You can even change up the co-hosts. Our first milestone goal is $500 a month. When we hit it, Roland, Wazoo, and I will do a 12-hour-long live-streamed episode with amazing giveaways and fan phone calls all day long on the DotP hotline. You'll be talking right alongside with us on the show. Show your support at patreon.com/defense of the patients. Thanks for listening. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Defense of the Patients. Today we're bringing you another one-on-one interview. I'm your host Cyphus, and I'm sitting here with my guest today. Y'all know him from Wannabe Wednesdays, the Wednesday.p.pro show, if you will. Jack, Korean Barbecue Chen. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Thanks, man. Good to be here. Good to be chatting with you like this.
Yeah, I was talking with Roland about it a couple nights ago, and we were just kind of talking about, like, you're probably the host that I think the audience has had the least exposure to in the long run, in the sense that the Wednesday show's been around now for a few months, but you, I think, were the only one we never really had as a guest on the show. Like, even Shrew had been on the show previously, and so we'd gotten a little into his history. But I guess you had done, what, like a Theorycraft Thursday at one point?
Yeah, I think that's how the ball got rolling. This was a while ago. I think I did some kind of Pudge Omni Lane, and it was a lot of fun. So that's how I kind of got really introduced up close and personal to the DotP network of things, and it's been great since then. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I know I really enjoyed that last Wednesday show. I was here for the recording, but then after the fact, because you're always distracted when you're in the studio. We have people coming in and out whenever those recordings are going on, and I caught little tidbits of it, and then I had to go back and listen to the whole thing. And it's kind of fascinating to hear what was going on behind the scenes there in Shanghai. I guess for those who don't know, you are still in Shanghai, right?
Yeah, so I'm basically here all the way up through the major till the end of the major, and obviously I want to give thanks out to Perfect World for making it possible, but basically they were going to fly me in for the major, and I requested to be flown in a little bit earlier so that I could also be at MDL for that tournament and then spend the time in between with my family. So that ended up working out. They ended up helping me out with that, so it ended up being a perfect arrangement for this month and a half, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. What family do you have over in Shanghai?
So most of my family is actually here, with the exception of my parents. Basically, I was born in Shanghai, so I went to the United States with my parents when I was really young, about 3 years old. And then, so most of my family, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, and a few cousins that I have, they're all actually here in China. Most of them are in Shanghai. So this is actually the first time since I was a little kid. This is the first time actually, since I've been an adult or whatever, that I've actually spent Chinese New Year here with them. So, or in China in general. So it's really nice to be able to do that, and it's one of the traditions that the Chinese still hold on to very, very dearly.
What's it like? What kind of celebrations are going on?
Well, I haven't actually been to the street celebrations and stuff. Actually, interestingly enough, so there's a big cultural divide usually within China, and in the south, for example, maybe near Hong Kong or Canton or those places, they're much more traditional, so they make sure to have the kinds of like festivals and celebrations that you or I might traditionally associate with that, like with like the whole dragon dance and all that stuff. So that stuff does exist here, but at the same time, Shanghai these days is a city where much of the population here is actually migrant workers. So I think the estimate was that up to 40 to 60% of the people who usually live and work in Shanghai will be returning to their respective home cities and towns during Chinese New Year. And that's like a big thing. Like you see it in commercials and stuff everywhere of like people going home for Chinese New Year because they're elsewhere, during most of the year. And that's the time where they get to be with their families.
So is it like a ghost town in Shanghai right now then?
I mean, probably not ghost town level, but yeah, a lot of places are like a bit more empty. A lot of like shopping centers and malls and stuff are closed. Not just because people are taking the time off, because if they're staffed by workers from other parts of China, they're not going to be here, obviously. So
right.
Yeah, like it's like a city. I don't know, almost like half capacity, so to speak, with like more of a skeleton crew and like the actual people who live here and are from here.
Wow, that's cool. So what I've always kind of been curious, like what is your job like as a translator? Like when you're at the events, what do they have you doing? Like what kind of communications are you being the go-between for?
Well, so the thing that I like about it is that you basically everything that requires any kind of communication. So it starts with official media functions. So let's say when they do interviews in the days before the players like play the matches or group stages, every major event has these where they get the players and they get them kind of separately for interviews, and then they do like a photo shoot with the team. So that's how they come up with all the really like snazzy and cool graphics and stuff when you see like the packages when they introduce the players. So they have to shoot all that stuff. So depending on whose turf I'm on, I'll help either the Chinese teams or the Western teams if they have those responsibilities. Basically get through that and then do the interviews, and then beyond that, it's also like any small requests that they have. Like usually very happy to be there and assist. Like let's say a manager wants this or that, or even small things like someone wants more fruit for their team or something like that, then I'll just go relay those and basically just be the conduit for communication. And then beyond that, once the matches actually start, usually it's more depending on whether I'm doing stage stuff or not. It could be post-game interviews. It could be more media interviews because some of the like non-official media doesn't get there until the event has started. So basically, just basically anything that requires some kind of medium of communication, I'm there for, and just stay busy and get to know everybody a little bit, and it's great. It's a lot of fun.
Do you think that puts you in a position to see the intimate workings of these events maybe a little bit better than the average player or manager or maybe even event organizer? I mean, because it sounds like you kind of get to see all facets of one of these lands being put on.
You do. I mean, I wouldn't say that we see it more than the players, for example, but you do see a lot of how different things are done and kind of how things are organized, like who answers to who and who makes the final decisions on things. So you do get to see, as you say, like a bit of an X-ray into like how the event is run. I wouldn't venture as to say more or less, but it also puts you in a position where you can help solve like other problems that go beyond communication if that's necessary or if that's ever asked for. And so that's really nice. And yeah, and you do get to know a lot of the people as well, like all the wonderful people behind the scenes who make the Dota events possible and who take care of the teams and get everyone ready and all that. Like there's they don't get usually the same kind of recognition or publicity, or maybe they do these days with social media, but it's nice to work with them and see how they do things.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything that you, I mean, kind of having that access that has surprised you about how the events are run, in a good way or a bad way?
That's a really good question, actually. Well, to be perfectly honest, I haven't been at that many of these events, but I mean, there's a bit of a difference, I guess, with East and West as far as I can tell, with like the maybe the status of the players or the comforts that players are used to. I think in both directions, East and West, you're seeing a trend towards players being treated better and better, and that's definitely a good thing. I mean, you always hear players talk about how, like, back in the day, like they'd be playing for really small prize pools, living out of someone's car or something, and, like, it would just be really tough. So that's getting better and better. You're seeing good accommodations. In terms of East and West, I think there's still some things, some, like, maybe amenities or luxuries where an Eastern organizer might think or, might say something like, well, this guy's being paid to play these games. He should probably suck it up or be a professional or deal with that. But that being said, I think it still tends in the direction of like they're attuned to the players' needs, and there's a certain polish I think that Western organizers have already, maybe with more experience or a different type of standard for these players that I think they do a better job of, and I think the Eastern tournaments could probably tend in that direction as well.
Do you think they're? I mean, you obviously feel like they're getting better. How far away do you think they are from maybe coming close to being the equal of the Western world in that regard?
I mean, it's probably it's hard to say because a lot of these are kind of event to event basis. Like some of them are venue related issues as well. Like this past MDL, the venue was in a mall, and there's certain things about the mall that I don't think the organizers, that the Mars TV people could really have control over. Like if the mall chooses to be like dimly lit and maybe save on electricity or lighting, there's nothing that Mars TV can do about that. And then like that's a really small detail, but it does create a different sense of things. Like it feels like almost like a smoky backroom type of tournament, when like the mall area upstairs isn't lit very well. And then there's things like, I mentioned that for example, the bathrooms didn't have hot water. So again, that's like a quality of life thing. It's not maybe like a huge issue, and the Chinese would just be like, well, usually homes don't have hot water during the winter, and you'll just have to suck it up. But that's like a basic amenity that I think Western players should be used to. But that's also beyond the control of Mars TV, like a tournament organizer. That's like the venue issue right there.
Right. Yeah. So going back a little bit, you said you went over, or you came over to the States when you were about 3. Where did your family first settle when they got to the U.S.?
It was actually upstate New York, so near Albany, which is the capital. There's this little suburb there, and that's where I was until basically junior high school, 7th or 8th grade, and at that point, I really enjoyed upstate. Like it's like it's like nice and beautiful and kind of quiet, and everybody's real nice and stuff. But maybe that's just your perception as a kid. And then we came to kind of New York City because my parents wanted me to go to a high school there that I had to take a test for. So we came to the city, and it was a bit of a culture shock. It's a bit different, and everything's a little bit faster and edgier in the city, and it was a lot of fun. Ultimately, I loved it. Initially, I didn't like it as much, but that's how I got to New York City, basically 7th and 8th grade. And as far as the China thing, I did manage to come back a few times for a couple of short stints of like a few months, like for like half a year of 3rd grade or something. And I think that, in hindsight, that ended up being really helpful because it established like a language foundation that I could build on quickly each time I came back. Like the foundation, as long as it's there, you can kind of pick things up from it. So I thought that was really important, and it helped me a lot.
I mean, were you always bilingual, or did it kind of occur, or did it really kick in when you first went back? Because you always hear like the best way to learn a language is to embed yourself, in a culture that speaks that language. But I mean, were your parents trying to keep you bilingual as you were growing up, or did they kind of just full on switch over to English when they got here?
So yeah, it was both. Largely, I think they took a lot more effort in making sure that I like learned and knew some Chinese compared to like some other, for example, like ABCs or American-born Chinese, or people raised there. So yeah, there was extra effort definitely from my mom, especially in like teaching me Chinese. And then, as you mentioned, with the embedding, I think that was probably the most important part. Just because even if you immerse yourself in the environment of a foreign country or place or whatever for a few months, just having all this passive input where like everything around you, all the signs, all everyone says is in that language, is just huge. And then actually going to school and for like half a year and learning language at the same time when everyone else is learning the language too, and when you're still young, I mean that's basically ideal because if you come back for school when you're older, it's not the same thing. You maybe aren't focused on learning the language. Maybe you're learning other things instead. But specifically in 3rd grade, yeah, like everyone else was learning Chinese too, all the students here too. So I mean, that was perfect. And I think that really laid the groundwork, that and my parents' effort, that allowed me to, maintain some level of Chinese competency, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me about this high school. You said it was a high school you had to take a test for. What kind of a test? What was so special about the high school that they decided to relocate you to the city?
Well, here's the thing: the situation with a lot of like immigrant parents, especially of different. I mean, there's different generations now. It's different now, but like my parents' generation of immigrants, generally speaking, a lot of people who could actually come overseas from China were. Generally speaking, I want to say like better educated. like compared to nowadays, where it's a little bit different, where the immigration is maybe a little more open, and you also have a lot of people coming, like who are like rich, for example, and they don't want their kids to grow up in China or something like that, or they feel like a call to the prestige and living standards of the West. So because of that generation, my parents included, big emphasis on education. And like education is probably the most stable form of opportunity, more or less, if you're an immigrant, because you don't have any other advantages, generally speaking. You don't have a very established network that's like embedded in the country that gives you opportunities. You may not be able to compete in other things that require you to be more acclimated, so to speak. So education is like the big equalizer. So in that respect, New York City has this nice system where they have a test called the SHSAT, and it enables you to get into certain high schools based on your score. So there used to be, when I took the test, there was 3 of them. It was Bronx Science, Brooklyn Tech, and Stuyvesant, and then now there's like 9 or something. So it allows kids to be able to take a test and prep for that test and get like a slightly, like I guess, better or higher quality or more competitive public education experience. So that was what some of my parents' friends' kids were doing that. So my parents decided to do the same thing, and that's one thing that spurred them to go to New York. Also, New York has a very large Chinese community. New York has a very large, just about every immigrant community. It really is a big melting pot. So that also spurred them to move to New York. It was a better place for everybody, and a better educational opportunity for me. So that's basically how that happened. And then I did take the test, and I did end up going to Stuyvesant High School. And initially, I hated it because no kid wants to leave all their friends behind for school. But
of course.
In hindsight, obviously, is a good opportunity. It was a lot of fun.
What kind of things did you study there?
It's supposedly like a math and science type of school, but I was never really big on math or science. I've always liked to write more than anything else.
But you're Asian, aren't you guys supposed to only care about math?
I've actually. So I'm sure you've heard of Malcolm Gladwell, but he actually, one of his books that I read had an interesting theory on that, which I think made a lot of sense, which was that in terms of like simple calculation and stuff, the words for numbers in Chinese or in Asian languages are actually, since they're all one syllable, are actually much quicker and much more intuitive for kids to grasp than, for example, numbers in English, which can often be multiple syllables. So his theory, not his theory, but like based on the research he found, was that the Asian kids maybe are better at calculating and doing that kind of simple math stuff because their number system is easier to grasp, and therefore it takes less wiring and thinking for them to access to. So that was an interesting theory that I heard on that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I've got a young nephew. He's about 4, and he mastered 1 through 10 relatively quickly. But you can see them. You can see kids that age struggling, or at least English-speaking kids that age struggling. When you do get to those, when you get above 10, I mean, that's where, that's where you start seeing those multiple syllabic, numbers or words for numbers. I don't know, that's kind of fascinating. I don't know. Wow. I never thought about that.
It speaks to other bigger things about languages too. I mean, I think, each language has, I'm no Noam Chomsky or anything, but like, it gets a window on how those people think and how they organize their thoughts. So like, it'd be great whenever you learn languages, you can kind of see how people organize information and classify stuff. And so, that always has certain advantages and disadvantages. And, it goes both ways, obviously. So,
that's it. Next time I do poorly with a math test, I'm just going to blame the fact that I speak English. I was disadvantaged. So did you end up going to college and pursuing education beyond high school?
Yeah. So I kind of, in a sense, walked the maybe the straight and narrow of kind of the immigrant type of path where, go to college and all that. I actually didn't do that well in high school. I kind of fell in with different groups of friends, and some of us were less focused on school than others were, and I was really, not about all that super competitive academic life at all. I'd like to write, and I didn't really care too much about anything else. And I'd rather be out playing basketball and playing games and stuff than going to school. And I cut a lot of class and all that. So actually, I kind of stumbled through high school, and that actually led to another opportunity to kind of be in China and improve my language, which was the first year. My first semester of college, I was actually deferred from Binghamton, which is where I went for undergrad. And because of that, I actually came to China for another few months to study for that winter semester because I had to do something and not just sit around. So that actually gave me another chance to come out to Shanghai, again, improve my Chinese a little bit and build on that foundation. Also met a lot of people from all over the world who study here, a lot of Japanese, Koreans. It was a really fun time, and that was an awesome first semester of college, so to speak. So yeah, that's basically what happened before I went back for school.
So does it at this point, do you feel like you're pursuing for lack of a better way to describe this, video games as a career? Would you say that that's an accurate way to describe your pursuits at this point in life?
Yeah, I think so. It was always a real, and you'll hear this story obviously from just about everyone. It was always a real struggle with parents who view things as kind of just a game and games as a diversion and kind of waste of time. But I think they've started to come around to the possibility that there are opportunities here, and even not as a professional player or anything like that, but as just on the organizational side, because of how big things are and how much it's growing. And I would say that after college and after grad school, I dabbled a lot in media and stuff like that. But I think ultimately I want to be involved in esports one way or another, whether it's as a translator for now or whatever other opportunities become available down the road. I'd love to be here, and I love playing games and love being involved right now with the people who are in this industry, and it's a lot of fun.
Did one of your parents in particular struggle with the notion more than the other, or are they kind of banded together? Or initially were they banded together to kind of stop this pursuit?
I think my dad was more close to it, because my dad is this very kind of gruff, old school type of personality, where it's just you need to do this and that, and you need to take care of business, so to speak, instead of these odd dreams and stuff that you have, or these interests that come second. So my mom was probably a little bit more open to that. She was a professor in China, so she's a bit more I would say, in terms of education and ideas and stuff, she was a bit more open to that sort of thing. So I think she was more supportive. And yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of resistance both ways, but at some point, I'm not a kid anymore, so I don't have to battle them all day anymore.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
I get to make my own decisions too.
So when you did you graduate from college then?
Sorry, what was that?
Did you graduate from college?
Yeah, I graduated. I finished undergrad in '08, and then after a year or two, I went for a master's in journalism. This time at Columbia, and then I graduated in 2011, I think, or 2012. I forget which year exactly, but that was the end of my education, I guess.
This is a selfish question, because it's one of the dream schools for me if I were to ever pursue grad school for psych. But what's Columbia like?
It was, I mean, it was great. There's all different kinds of people there. There's for journalism, one of the things about grad school is a lot of people are already in the field, and they're looking to get a leg up or something. So there are a lot of people who are kind of already established journalists and writers, or for TV stations. There are also people switching careers, kind of, or one guy, Vladimir Dutier, who's now actually, I think, the CBS Morning News anchor or something. He was my partner for some of our class projects. And this guy was, I think he was a managing director at some Wall Street firm. And I think he already had a obviously very successful, well-established career, but he decided that he wanted to finally get into journalism, maybe do something that he loved more and was more interested in. So you get those people too, and it was interesting. You get you're in the media center of New York. A lot of the faculty there were obviously well decorated, so you had numerous whatever Pulitzer winners and other people who were very good writers and reporters. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of interesting little stories and tidbits, and people who just done like crazy things. And then there's whole different tiers of people who are just so talented that it just kind of boggles the mind. Like one of my professors, Howard French, he was the bureau chief, I think, on like 3 continents or something.
Wow.
Like Tokyo and then Beijing and then Africa for the New York Times. And it was just like, this guy is just like a different tier of person. Like he learns all these languages wherever he goes. He's just like, he's just so like well composed and so capable that they'll entrust him to like all these tasks. And so yeah, it's a nice experience. You meet a lot of different people, and it's good. You can learn a lot.
Do you, is there a part of you that would still like to pursue a career in more traditional journalism, or do you kind of see yourself hoping to meld the two notions together, the esports and journalism?
I think initially there was, but there's also, I don't know how to say this, but there's a difference. There's just in how the worldview that more traditional journalists like take for the most part, and like how they talk about things and think about things, it is a little different. It's a little bit more entrenched and I think conservative, generally speaking. It's hard for me to generalize like this, but it's hard for me even to describe how I feel about this. But I don't feel like I really belong in that paradigm or in that world. Like I don't feel that I think about things and perceive things the same way. I think I'm a little bit like, I have more unique, more different background in terms, not unique, but like a different way of thinking about things and different interests as well. So I think that the whole esports thing is going to grow into its own animal, and you're going to have different ways of, through social media and through young people, different ways of looking at things and different things that are interesting to them versus the very more conservative, conventional narrative that some of that journalism has. So yeah, I don't think I ever really felt a strong draw to the mainstream. I mean, obviously parents would be happy about it, and maybe it sounds prestigious to say you're working for this or that, but it's a totally new playing field now, and I'd rather be in.
Sure. I mean, what do you think that difference is? Like, what, how would you characterize it? What is it that, what do you feel like it is that really separates you from that?
I just feel like there's a certain, I don't want to call it political correctness, but there's a certain like propriety to how for the most part, the mainstream media reports on things or paints things, and compared to like the edginess and the more like down to earth type of stuff, and maybe less appropriate or more controversial type of thing that maybe younger generations and people in esports are doing and exposed to. And I think some of it is just standards, and some of it is like how the industry has chosen to approach and cover things. But again, it's hard for me to fully describe, but there's just a certain like propriety to it that I've never really been really drawn to or a huge fan of, and I kind of like the kind of frontier type of feeling of like esports.
Definitely. I don't know. I've always kind of felt like I've always felt a little bit like the lack of maybe of standards within the esports community, and which is definitely what gives some of it its edge. And don't get me wrong, there's an edge to esports that I definitely find fascinating. That I like you. I thoroughly enjoy that we're kind of on the frontier. And you're definitely right. It is the frontier. It's the wild fucking west out here with with media in esports. But I've always kind of felt like those standard, or the lack of standards, in some regards might be responsible for, or might be part of what's held esports back. You know what I mean? Like maybe if we held ourselves to more rigorous standards, or we didn't have that like new age mentality about it, that we might be able to take esports, and I don't mean Dota even, specifically, but just esports in general, and make it a little more mainstream. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of different issues that kind of cross over into that. So if you look at, for example, the development of standards and like ethics, quote unquote ethics for journalism, a lot of that came out of for business reasons or very practical reasons. Like at some point, people realized that if you wrote something as objectively as possible, you would piss off the least number of people by not taking a stand, which papers used to do, and that was actually the correct business move. So it wasn't necessarily a sense of like honor or let's do this like the right way. It was more of like, hey, this is a very practical business decision. If we present as much to both sides as we can, avoid pissing people off. In terms of things being maybe not as mature or not as developed in terms of standards, it's all different. Like people have much more access to information now, or and people can kind of shape their own narratives much more as well, instead of say using journalists or whatever to try and tell your story, and then them trying to use you, so to speak, like for access and information. People can tell their own stories now. It's a lot grittier and a lot more personal. Esports has, generally speaking, had pretty good access in terms of there isn't like as big of a wall, at least right now, between like the players and the personalities and the people in the scene. So that also kind of changes like how the standards are and how you talk about stuff. And then it's really just always a battle of information as well. Like, is there incentive on both sides to give information and to have that be then reported and then molded into consumption for people, or is there very little incentive for that information to come out, or disincentive to do so? And I think because it's a kind of Wild West situation, as you described, a lot of times there isn't that much incentive because people are doing things different ways for different organizations, and that information, they don't necessarily have the incentive to kind of shape that. So there's just a lot of factors involved in a question like that, and obviously time will tell what kinds of things people find acceptable and enjoyable, and what kinds of information they're willing to share. And then obviously there's a lot of individual effort and ingenuity that goes into that as well. So it's a really big question that you're asking.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I guess I always kind of had like an opposite view or an opposite perception of more traditional media, especially. I mean, I guess it's hard to classify traditional media because it feels like it underwent a drastic change over like the last 25 years or so. I feel like you see, Fox News and MSNBC are kind of, with the advent of cable and cable news and 24-hour news cycles. I feel like you see people going maybe more after like marketed segments where they aren't really writing objectively. And there's a part of me that misses the days where we wrote objectively, because I feel like that's where perhaps you get the most truth in journalism, as when you do try to take that objective stance. And I know that like and it's not even just here in the U.S., but I mean, you look at abroad, like in Britain, Rupert Murdoch, famously, has done a lot of crazy stuff over there. They are responsible for a lot of definitely behavior that we would consider unethical over here. And they do things. I guess they get kind of edgy too. They, I think it's in the UK where they market the newspaper and they have nude women. They have naked ladies inside the newspaper because they knew, hey, sex sells. Sex sells everything. Sex can sell the news. So I mean, maybe there isn't that big of a difference between esports media versus traditional media in that regard. Maybe we are always going to piss somebody off, so to speak.
Yeah, ultimately when it comes down to it, it's a lot of these are still business decisions. It's kind of like not an ugly truth, but an unfortunate truth that people who want to believe in the sanctity, for the most part, of the industry and stuff still have to realize what grinds the gears and what gets that stuff going. So it's to what extent do you want to sell things? What are you trying to sell? Sometimes you're selling knowledge, or very specific knowledge. Sometimes you're selling almost the illusion of knowledge because people want to feel informed and knowledgeable on things, where if they really wanted that knowledge, they would have to be there or maybe read a detailed book or something. But the media maybe gives you that instant access and that satisfaction that you've learned something or known something. So it's a lot of different factors, as you say, and obviously sensationalism and sex and stuff has a certain appeal. It does sell, and as you mentioned in Britain, you might be talking about what happened in the past as well. Here, where you have more of an agenda, where papers are very clearly politically aligned one way or the other, and they kind of drive an agenda or present a side, and that's kind of accepted as part of the British consumptive culture. Like you kind of go to which side you believe in, or maybe you read both if you kind of want a balanced picture. So it's hard to say, and obviously for esports for the time being, it's maybe a good example would be looking at not traditional, but more established sports media. ESPN obviously just picked up an esports section, and it's still, sports media is obviously still more on the side of entertainment and all of that than maybe necessarily being informative or talking about issues and such. So that's probably a niche for esports to fall into and find its own path, so to speak, in there.
Yeah, definitely. I think we had Zaori on recently with the Try Hard Tuesday folks, and I can't remember if he talked about it on the show or if it was offline with us after the fact, but he mentioned the ESPN esports coverage as well, and I think his comment was if ESPN really wanted to be kind of on the cutting edge, and I'm definitely paraphrasing him here, but if they wanted to be on the cutting edge of esports, they would have gotten into the game years ago. He kind of feels like that ESPN and traditional media are seeking out esports because they need us, and maybe we don't need them. I don't know. What do you think it's a good thing that we're starting to see ESPN do that sort of thing, or do you think the industry could thrive without all that traditional stuff?
That's an interesting point, actually. I don't. So, for as far as when you talk about say when you look at these trending things that ESPN has hopped in on, so over the years it's been things like poker and before that the whole X Games and kind of extreme sports, and there was kind of an issue with that as well as they wanted to have Dota tournaments, I think, at some of the X Games, and some of the now so-called entrenched X Games people, I think, chafed at that, and they were like, no, what is this? This is even though they themselves were kind of the outcasts a few years ago.
Yeah.
So I think in a sense, I wouldn't go so far as to say they need us, but I think they probably resisted it, and they're beginning to follow where the money or where the business is going. I think they have paid attention to the fact that Mark Cuban and otherwise big sports figures have started to invest in esports. I think it's basically become too much for them to ignore at this point. But there's also a point in what you said earlier about how this has been around for some time, and they certainly, if they believed in it a while ago, they certainly could have invested in it sooner or even helped it grow just by their exposure and recognition. And it feels a little bit more. It does feel a little bit more reactionary than proactive, if that's kind of the gist of what you got or what you were hearing.
Yeah.
So that does seem to be the case, but at the same time, I think it is good. It does expose. It does give more legitimacy and attention. They have tremendous resources, obviously, and a huge outlet, and that legitimacy is going to help make the Wild West scene a little bit less Wild West. It's going to attract attention. People who can organize things or make things happen are going to come in, and it's pretty similar to maybe how the symbiotic relationship that so-called traditional sports grew in. I think there was a time not so long ago where if you told your parents you wanted to play whatever, you couldn't do that, or professional athletes had to work multiple jobs in their off season of whatever sport they played, or they had to play multiple sports. I think even right now, WNBA players during their off season, they go overseas to play. And when you talk about how those sports grew, and then you had all these scandals, right, with people taking money because they weren't making enough money from the sport itself, so they had to throw games, or not had to, but some of them chose to go that way. So in that sense, it was symbiotic. The media helped nurture those sports and that awareness, and it helped them develop into more legitimate and more polished products, which made things better for all the players and such. It's an endless struggle, but it certainly helped, and I hope that kind of symbiosis kind of exists with esports and ESPN and all the mainstream stuff that's jumping into it now.
Do you think though that because I feel like there's a resistance in the ultra hardcore gaming community, there's some resistance to going more mainstream. I think they want to be able to, say, hey, fuck that in the middle of a cast for a Dota match. Something that you definitely couldn't do if the game were aired on ESPN or you knew it was going to be, simulcast on ESPN. I also think there's a resistance to kind of having that polish. I think they feel like if we further polish esports, that we're going to take away that edge that everybody loves so much about it. I don't know. Do you think that's necessarily a bad thing if we take away that edge? Do you think that it's a bad thing if it develops that polish, or do you think that that's maybe a necessary step?
I think that's a really good question. I see what you're getting at, and I've heard it. I think the most similar argument I've heard is kind of the corporatization of stuff, right? So things become more sanitized, or you stop being able to maybe speak your mind, or or even now you may be starting to see that with something like, for example, League of Legends. Riot controls its players apparently very tightly, and in terms of what they say and how they behave, all that stuff. It's much more controlled and less accessible, I think, than some other esports. So if that's what those people are getting at, then yeah, I kind of agree that's not a good thing, and you kind of want that access, and you want, especially these younger fans, to be able to feel that they can really relate to and their favorite players and all that, and not just like a soulless husk, so to speak, who's saying whatever he needs to say for the sponsors or for whoever else. But I think ultimately it's probably going to go in that direction, just because there's too much money and there's too much incentive there for people not to head in that direction. They have to, and they also have to protect themselves and their image. And ultimately, people find out that the best way to protect yourself from a business perspective, an image perspective, is to say as little as possible, or you have to be abrasive or edgy, very tactically, very, very carefully. Otherwise, you kind of just give, very general answers to things and just build your likability that way. So, I mean, there's all this other stuff. Ultimately, what it comes down to is that once that money starts to enter, once the big bucks start to come in, and that becomes inseparable from the game, then you, in some sense, you have to answer to the interests of that. So that's definitely going to be a factor, and I think it's almost unavoidable.
Do you think assuming that meteoric rise of esports and that similarity between the traditional sports and esports, and perhaps that symbiotic relationship between the media and esports develops, do you think that gamers are going to be good role models? The way, and admittedly, a lot of pro athletes are not great role models, but they still become role models. Do you think gamers are good role models?
I think for now and for the time being, yeah, I think so, and I think they will continue to be. I think you look at the stories of some of these players, and so we talked about this earlier. It kind of goes full circle with like a great equalizer, right? So for a lot of people for whom traditional school and whatever traditional pathways are not the best fit for them or a way for them to go, I think they can get some inspiration from these people who have chosen a very roundabout path and who've made tremendous sacrifices and put in a lot of time and effort, and without even knowing if there would be a future for them or if that reward existed. Whenever you're a pioneer or at the frontier of any field, you're taking that risk essentially that you're not going to get anything back, and people were able to do that and are able to take that path now. So it's nice. I think that does make these players role models for a lot of these younger fans, and I think that's a good thing as well. And there's it's always mixed, because again, like if you treat, for example, younger and younger kids and players as stars, it can distort maybe their sense of reality a little bit and makes them different people, and maybe there's parts of that aren't always positive, or there's a certain entitlement to that, and that you see that obviously with that's been much discussed in professional regular sports as well, with like the coddling of athletes or the building them up so much, and then what skills do they have beyond the games that they play afterwards, and like how do they adapt to life when they're not at the center of attention. So all those issues are going to come up too with with esports athletes when we have like essentially teenagers making a lot of money and being catered to. So that's going to be an issue as well. But for the time being, I mean, I think they are definitely just role models. Like they're there at home. They're they're fighting against all odds. They're persevering against all these other smart and talented people, and just going by their effort and their talent, they're able to make something of themselves and find their way in this new world. So I think that's a really good story, really inspirational story. And a lot of them have to overcome a lot of resistance from from their parents and their peers and stuff too. It's not an easy road by any means.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put it. And absolutely, pioneering on that front is, you're right. It's always going to be a good message to send that, hey, it's okay to take a risk. It's okay to take a risk and pursue something you love. That's a message I think. It's a message I think everybody would like to receive at some point and like to believe in, even if it doesn't necessarily always come true. It is nice to see those stories when they do. So, all right. Speaking of pioneering, I feel like it's a good segue. When did you start translating? How did that even come to be?
So as with a lot of things in esports, kind of at this early time, it's a lot of timing and luck and stuff as well. So one of my for ESL New York, one of my personal friends from New York City, used to work in esports, and I basically told him that I was kind of interested in going that direction, and one thing led to another, and basically it turned out that ESL wanted a translator for their New York tournament. So that's basically how I got involved with that, and then I think they liked the job that I did. I guess they thought I did a decent job, so more opportunities basically came from that, and that's how it started, really just a few months ago. And yeah, it's been going on that track since then, and just continuing to try to build those relationships, and just take whatever opportunities they give me. And I know I'm just basically grateful for any chance that I get, and just hopefully just work my way up from there, or just whatever allows me to kind of stay here, and maybe yeah.
So what if you got your ultimate wish working within the esports field? What would you like it to be? Where would you like to see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years?
So that's a question that I should probably have an answer to, but I've always kind of played things by ear, more or less. That's just been how I've approached life, for better or worse, and often worse. But I think looking at how big esports is and is getting all over the world, I think I could see in 5-10 years being in some role where maybe knowing that additional language and being able to kind of serve as a go-between between people on different sides of the world. I think I see that being a useful asset. And so even if it's not just translation, I could see in 5-10 years being involved in some aspect of the growth or communication in esports, and leveraging basically the language skills that I've been lucky enough to have into that.
Yeah, and that's Chinese and English in the world of esports. You hit the jackpot, my friend. It doesn't get much better than that.
I hope so.
So, So you've got Shanghai Major coming up here pretty soon, right?
Yeah, that's coming up in I think soon. About 2 weeks, I think, is when the group stages start, or something like that.
When do all the teams show up? I mean, how much earlier do they get to the events than spectators than the rest of the folks?
I think it usually varies from team to team, because sometimes things will come up, and but usually they're there like just a little bit before the group stage, so they can get their media responsibilities done, and then so it's not too long. And then obviously they like to acclimate and like practice and stuff. And I'm not sure, maybe for this event, I wouldn't be surprised if some teams tried to come even earlier, maybe to kind of get the jet lag issue dealt with. But I'm not sure if that's possible. I mean, they still have other obligations and tournaments, so I don't know precisely who is coming when. But probably, like a couple days before group stages start, or a day or two to get settled in.
So work for you will probably start up right as they start filtering in.
Yeah, pretty much. This is pretty much whatever they need for communication, or whatever.
Well, that's cool. Well, I'm glad that you came on the show and we got to hear a little bit about you before the Shanghai Major comes up. I know I'm looking forward to seeing it. I know I'm looking forward to listening to the next Wednesday show that you do with Shrew, talking about it. The stories you guys got into last Wednesday were definitely fascinating, and I love getting that behind the scenes look. I think other people do too.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and yeah, I definitely look forward to some more good times and some interesting stuff. And as always, sometimes I do feel that there's maybe a little bit of conflict of interest in some sense, although nobody has told me that yet, or we've really discussed it. But obviously, things that are super secret, I'm usually not privy to, or obviously not behind the scenes for. But I try to keep it positive and keep it general and about pretty basic stuff. And I love to share that kind of world as much as possible with listeners, and just give a glimpse into these maybe little quirks that players have, or things that they do that reflects on their personality and all that stuff. So yeah, whatever is appropriate to share, I'd love to do that, and look forward to another really big and fun event.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I think I'm going to wrap us up. If you guys want to find Jack, you can find him on Twitter at KBBQDota. That's the other question. So you're Chinese descent. Why Korean barbecue?
So yeah, I get this question a decent amount as well. I mean, I just love Korean barbecue. Yeah, it's like, I mean, simply put, like, yeah, the pork belly, and the beef and stuff, just the way they cook things. They have a certain way of doing things that I love. So I just became my, hey, I need a name, I'll just go with that one.
All right, well, now I'm hungry. So if you guys want to find us, you can find us on Twitter at .p_show. Of course, again, that's Jack Chen at KBBQDota. And defenseofthepatients.com. Check out our leaderboards for the .p in-houses. We've been running those on Thursday nights and Saturday nights. All the rules and all the info you need to get access to the in-houses and all that good stuff is there. You can find our Amazon banner there. And, of course, check out Patreon if you'd like to support the show that way. Search for Defense of the Patients on iTunes when you can leave us a review. Roland loves that, and he misses them terribly when they're not there. I think that's going to be it for me, folks. So thanks once more, Jack, for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Great to be here.
And until next time, this is Cyphus for Korean BBQ saying good luck and Godspeed.